Alrighty. I may be an Outis hater, but she easily got the more interesting of the two IDs this time around. Welcome LCA Udjat Vanguard Team Free Leader, Outis. She's a solid plug-and-play all-rounder for sinking. She can tank, do damage, and even comes with a sinking payoff in her kit that doesn't immediately flush away your entire account. In terms of modern ID design, I reckon this will be the new standard. Easy enough to plug and play, in-depth enough for a few optimizations where relevant. Anyhow, she's based off the LCA Udjat rather than the Ruiner ones. While she retains the Khopesh, Eye of Horus, and Egyptian motifs, this version now has a gun. As for the differences in kit, she applies Sinking and Tremor, both of which do not exist in Ruiner. However, she does take quite a lot of the defensive capabilities featured in the Udjat combat and key pages. This is through all of her skills having some kind of defensive upside in the provision of protection, with ways of gaining even more stacks of protection. In this particular case, it's easier to start with her passives, since all of her skills need to factor it in. Starting off, we've got Scepter of Horus, Replica. We gain a very strong buff if any enemy has a panic type changing effect. Off the top of my head, these are Ruin, Echoes of the Manor, and Shattermark. Udjat Outis also has one built into her kit. Regardless, almost every one of these effects are applied next turn and tick downwards, meaning that getting her special buff here isn't the most reliable, but is thankfully not the only source. As for the buff itself, it's called the Udjat Vanguard, and features a stupid amount of extra speed, a stack of protection, and a bunch of weirdly strong debuffs to skills targeting Outis for that turn. Specifically, unopposed attacks halve the chance for the first coin to flip heads, while clashes resolve the first clash, with all coins having half chance to flip heads. Read as opposite for minus coins, wherein they'll halve the chance to flip tails instead. This effect is just a souped up version of the key page passive Haboob, where in Ruiner it would only grant protection and stagger protection. But here it accelerates Outis to a stupid degree and gives an unusual layer of defense in mitigating RNG spikes from enemies. While in a sinking team this isn't the craziest effect, having a unit roll heads 1 in 40 times is quite a lot worse than 1 in 20. The latter still sounds possible, but the former goes into the territory of freak accidents. That said, the higher the enemy SP, the more return on this defensive effect we get, reducing coin flip chances to as low as 47.5% even when their SP is full. Essentially, Outis treats the first clash as if the enemy has a bit below 0 SP, which in a lot of cases may be enough for her to overcome the rest of the coins and win the clash quite handedly. Any lower and the odds just get worse and worse for the enemy as well. If they're at 0 SP, they'd be treated as having minus 25 instead, which is bloody insane. Anyhow, this effect can trigger 3 times per turn, once per skill. Next we get Schutzfracture. This is Outis' unique debuff. Treated as a mark, we need to build up to 10 to get its payoff. On the way, we also amplify damage of both Sloth and Gloom skills. Once the mark pops, it deals sinking potency as Gloom damage before expiring, costing a single count of sinking to do so. Additionally, it transfers like the Plague if the target dies while having any stacks, moving half to an ally with the highest SP. Now this isn't exactly Mega Cancer, but it is on the degree of Mini Cancer. It's also a payoff for sinking without needing to resort to Yi Sang. Now so long as we can stack sinking potency, we can also cash in every now and then through Schutzfracture. I'll go into how we even build that up with the skills later. Past there is LCA Fracture Rounds. This is her unique ammo, that when spent, inflicts additional Schutzfracture per round used. Aside from that, protection from base skills and her personal buff are capped at 5 per turn. This is already 50% damage reduction, which is still damn nice. For reference, one of the only other IDs that can get this much protection in their kits alone is Sunshower Heathcliff. As for her fueled passive, it requires a free res of Gloom, and buffs her damage by 5% per protection stack, while also granting 2 Udjat Vanguard at combat start. This is the only other way of getting Udjat Vanguard, but is exceedingly reliable as we would only need to get a free res of Gloom every 3 turns. On a sinking team, this is stupid easy, and often ends up being done unintentionally even. Anyhow, long ass passive aside, we can finally get into the rest of her bloody kit. Her S1 rolls quite well with coin power conditionals for Tremor and sinking on target. Here the magic number is 12, distributed between the two. It also gets additional clash power if we have her unique buff. If we win a clash with this skill, we're applying 2 Should Fracture before dealing out sinking and tremor count. As long as the second coin hits as well, we're going to be gaining a protection stack for the next turn too. With Udjat Vanguard, each hit will also apply Should Fracture as well, meaning S1 can output 4 Should Fracture in total if all the conditionals are fulfilled. Aside from that, it gives a sprinkle of aggro, which is just okay. The S2 is a little meatier, but otherwise your standard potency stim. Once again, magic number 12 for coin power conditionals between sinking and tremor. With Udjat Vanguard, we get +2 clash power this time, as well as 30% extra damage. For such an easy to obtain buff, it's quite a nice magnifier. Anyhow, Clash Win means more Should Fracture, with the skill applying count and potency for both sinking and tremor, as well as granting a protection stack. Not bad at all considering how easy the conditionals are. With Udjat Vanguard, the skill doles out 5 Should Fracture, due to having 3 hits and applying 2 on the clash. Last, this gives a pinch of aggro instead of a sprinkle, at least. Now, S3 is where the bullets come into play. Out the gate, Udjat Vanguard grants 50% extra damage, but no clash power this time. There's not much coin power to be gained on this one, relevant statuses only needing 6 here. However, we do get a stupid amount of base power due to the skill counting bullets to be expended for additional base power. Aside from that, we gain 2 protection and a lot of aggro. In total, there's 4 bullets to be spent, 2 on the first coin and 2 on the third coin. These boost those coins' damage by 30% per bullets used up to 60%. As expected, this S3 deals out status potency and count, but notably no tremor count, instead opting to burst tremor up to twice, second burst only triggering if the target has SP. Furthermore, this skill inflicts a panic type changing effect on the second coin in the form of blue sand. On Clash Lose, gain 1 sinking, 3 times per turn. If this unit has no SP, they lose 1 max and minimum speed. If they go into low morale, they lose clash power and speed. On panic, they lose even more clash power. This effect is pretty okay. Essentially for 3 turns, so long as we win clashes, we magically produce 3 more sinking counts on the target. Not exactly the best, but not terrible either. If anything, this falls into the realm of steady and consistent. It also makes anything that would have otherwise gone neutral with 2+ counts, do neutral on 1 count, as long as a clash was won. The skill 3 also applies 1 gloom resistance down and 1 gloom fragility, the latter only being applied if the target has less than 0 SP. Gloom resistance down mileage may vary depending on how high a target's gloom resistance is to begin with. At 0.5 going to 0.6 is quite a lot, but at 1.5 going to 1.6 will feel like next to nothing. Regardless, it's more damage. Finally, since this skill uses bullets, 4 of them, it applies up to 7 Should Fracture, 3 from hitting with coins under Udjat Vanguard, and 4 from the bullet expenditure. It also reloads if we're at less than 2 bullets remaining, up to 5 times per encounter. Under what circumstances we would need to pop off this S3 more than 24 times in an encounter beats me, but perhaps the fellas running MD15 would beg to differ. With that out of the way, we have a normal defense skill. It rolls reasonably high, but doesn't have any further coin conditionals. It does inflict sinking on the attacker, and gains an additional protection stack for Outis if we have Udjat Vanguard. Furthermore, it grants shield equal to 5% of HP per stack of protection, reaching up to 15%. As a reminder, attacks hitting a guard count as unopposed, and will thus trigger the Udjat Vanguard coin rolling shenanigans for unopposed attacks. With the level of protection she has access to, this guard actually mitigates quite a lot of damage on a good day. So with all of that in mind, what do we need in order for her kit to shine or perform its role well? First off, we'll need a sinking team as a base, as well as grabbing anyone who can grant us a panic type change effect. The 2 of those go hand in hand, so there shouldn't be any real conflicts of interest here. As for the tremor parts of her kits, they're quite hard to reasonably make use of, but we can try. Plus, we're essentially building a sinking team, but with a sprinkle of tremor in order to get things off of the ground. In addition, we'll want some bullet synergy, because why the heck not? That S3 has a really cool animation, and it's not like sinking doesn't have another gunslinger lying around. Now sinking has one major issue that sticks out like a sore thumb. Rather, every one of the major statuses, except maybe Tremor, has this bloody issue. Count. Since Count gets burned on hits, we're going to need some very good sinking Count merchants. Thankfully, over the years, we've gotten quite a few that we can make use of. While they're not exactly what I'd call packages, they are definitely core staples for this archetype, as practically no one here shares a faction. Let me start with a couple of core solos. First, say hello to Kodya. You knew this was coming, I knew this was coming. This fellow's bloody inevitable. She outputs a stupid amount of sinking counts that is pretty much unfair. This more or less accommodates her inability to make use of ego effectively while doing so. While in her despair state, she inflicts an absurd amount of counts through making use of her low SP to increase count infliction on all of her skills, first coins, and clash. All of them can apply plus 5 counts, while fulfilling both conditionals due to the SP gain on clash win. The S2 pumps 2 more counts in its effects even, while the S3 pumps out plus 4 more. She is stupid positive. It's really damn hard to justify not taking her along in this composition. In total, S1 is plus 3, S2 is plus 4, and S3 is plus 6. All stupid numbers to be playing with. If we wanted to cash out, we could even get a third stack of Tier Sharpened to get plus 3 more sinking on the next attack, shoot back into the positive, then probably just Rhyme Shank for even more counts. This is the single most status-brained unit in the entire composition, and it isn't even close. Regardless, in terms of egos, we can consider Rhyme Shank as pretty much her only option, and even then we'd want to turbo her into the negative. It's unlikely to come up unless we want to dump Count to go positive first. If we can overclock it, sinking Count's issues should be permanently solved for the fight anyhow. Next solo on the field is Ishmael. We have 2 to choose from this time. Zhong Office Ishmael and Mola Boatworks Fixer Ishmael. Both of these have rather potent upsides and change the build slightly based on who we choose to grab. Hanafuda Ishmael gives us a proper use for the Tremor that's been building up thanks to Outis. While it's not too much to cash in on, we can turn it into Tremor Decay, that of which is the kind of Tremor we don't actually want to burst. Since our composition is quite mixed damage in nature, this isn't a bad option for amplifying damage in defense level down. However, we will need to play a little more carefully when it comes to sinking count due to Hanafuda not being the most positive for our count. While parts of her kits allow us to go neutral, the minigame may throw us off and force us to play less nicely with sinking, making the payoff of Schutz Fracture less enticing. While the utility is 100% there for Hanafuda, the reliability is questionable if we want to run her here. If we feel like doing more math on a single target, she's a solid option with quite a lot of payoffs. However, if we want to turn our brain off and chew the sinking crayon a little more, we'll want to look at Mola Ishmael. Mola Ishmael is a count demon. So long as her passive is active, she's at least neutral. However, her S1 and S3 become ridiculously positive. As she also puts out a little Tremor, you can pretty much guarantee 100% uptime on this passive and fast dole out ridiculous count numbers. In addition, her self-Tremor also applies Fragile when using her S3. We're going to be making quite a lot of use of this later. Plus, for the time being, I'm going to slot in Mola Ishmael for turbo consistency. In terms of egos, Ishmael actually offers quite a few nice options for sinking. Bygone Days is a heal, damage buff, and more count. The passive is also rather useful for when we get more of the panic type changes. Aside from that, we're looking at Tidal Elegy and Christmas Nightmare. The former turbos Ishmael quite a bit, while the latter helps with the Tremor side of things. In most cases, Tidal will be more useful, but either of these are perfectly fine. Aside from that, some use can be had from 100-footed Death Maggot, but it's mainly for the passive rather than anything else. From there, let's look at the other LobCorp agents. Solemn Lament Yi Sung. This guy gives us another small payouts for sinking in the form of Butterfly. This is a unique debuff split into the Living and Departed. The Living gives us SP for hitting the target, whereas the Departed deals damage based on sinking potency and Departed counts. At turn end, we lose all Departed before converting the Living into the Departed and inflicting sinking equal to the stack converted. Yes, this is a stupid way of getting sinking, but it's pretty straightforward in use somehow, so just roll with it. Regardless, he turns sinking into damage. Just make sure you clash with him to ensure he doesn't go fully negative while using his skills. Of note, he's another ammo character. This will be important later when it comes to picking our bench options. Aside from that, we're going to want to look at his egos. The main one of consequence here is Bygone Days. It applies a lot of sinking, but is notably in individual instances. Plus, if you trigger this ego on a turn where Echoes of the Manor is active, you can suddenly ramp sinking counts by an absurd amount. While this is more so a tech option, it's a very powerful one when offered. Alright, now for the Canto 6 package, for lack of a better term. We've got Wild Hunt, Butler Faust, and Linton Gregor. Wild Hunt's use is quite straightforward. He exists to lament, mourn, and despair, but more importantly to inflict ruin as much as possible. This is a panic type change on his S2 and is very easy to apply to multiple targets even. This specific panic type adds a lot of sinking when entered, but can also just lower a head's chance by 10% for those without SP. Needless to say, it's a welcome addition to our team. Aside from that, Heathcliff is no slouch in terms of damage and can ramp up to rather absurd stats if required for longer fights. While on foot, his S3 is very count positive, especially if used during a turn with Ruin active. Past that though, the rest of his kit is mostly negative count, but is more than worth using. In terms of egos, he can provision asymmetrical inertia for Broken Bell. This will basically only trigger on Outis' S3, but what's another source of fragile but more damage? We won't be using that very often. Binds, on the other hand, is always useful, if only for the passive. As for Butler Faust, she's here for two things. 1. Echoes of the Manor. 2. Fluid Sac. She exists to S3 and drops sacks to end the battle in victory. Aside from that, her S2 is positive and her S3 can rarely be positive depending on how you line up your skill buckets. Anyhow, Echoes of the Manor is the most important thing here. It's pretty much gambling for counts per hits. This can turn a lot of attacks positive with the power of luck. Mind you, 50-50 is pretty good under the deluge of coins in this team. The effects can also spread if the host panics. As mentioned earlier with Yi-Sung's Bygone Days, since the effect triggers per instance of sinking applied and Bygone Days is a shotgun of 15 or so instances, we can get a lot of mileage out of combining the two. Last in this bunch is Linton Gregor. He's a glass cannon that doesn't eat our count too badly, at least so long as we pay attention. He scales directly with how much sinking we have on targets, and has access to a very potent ego. It's the other Solemn Lament. This one is a rapid-fire damage nuke. Essentially, it's just an even flashier version of Yi-Sung's butterfly application, but can also just drown 8 whole coins of damage into a target. Since it applies butterfly as well, the stacks can get quite out of hand and max out real fast to boot. Since we've covered all of our on-field sinners, let's look at our bench warmers. First up is LCB Don. This one is just pierce damage slop. The most sane amongst us does more pierce damage. It ain't gonna be Kodya, it ain't gonna be Yi-Sung, so it'll likely fall to Outis or Ishmael. Ishmael more so due to how we're going to get her to work. Next is Mexiclaire. He exists to let our sane sinners hit harder. That's about it. Floppiest of the schlop. Give the boy a new sinking ID, please, I beg. Past there is a rather unusual pick. If you've seen my Regret Faust video, you might have seen this one coming. Eurodivi Ryoshu. We can fuel her support passive reasonably well here, and we're handing the first slot over to Ishmael as she benefits from gaining tremor count. Ensuring her S3 always applies the maximum amount of fragile is the idea here. It's a small tech option, but a welcome one. If we wanted to run Hanafuda though, the pivot would be towards LCCB Assistant Manager Roshu, to proc Lucky Sig on Yi-Sung and Outis instead. Past there is our gun synergy package. We've got Lay Salts and Full Stop Hongers. While both of them are on-field powerhouses should we need them to clean up shop, both also have ammo-related supports. Lay Salt targets the fastest ally to dump bullets. Outis is a little more consistent in getting there, with Udjat Vanguard, compared to Yi-Sung's haste on reload. As for Hongers, his one targets the ally with the most ammunition. At first this will be Yi-Sung, then it will randomly alternate based on who dumps more bullets. Since Outis starts with 16 bullets, 1 or 2 skills from Yi-Sung before Outis uses an S3 will more or less guarantee her being targeted for it. With everyone out of the way, we can now discuss play patterns. First off, deployment order does matter here. We're going to want our counterpliers up front, with Ishmael taking the first slot and Kodya taking the second. This ensures that Ish gets a real shoes passive later on. Next we'll want the Udjats, since they're currently the only one who can apply Schutz's Fracture. It'll be up to her to trigger it. From there, Yi-Sung for the payoff, and the rest can then take whatever remaining slots. On turn 1, we're going to want to aim for a few things based on specific Sinner's buckets, and a few potential ego goals. We're also going to want to assume that we're against a single target, since sinking is pretty terrible when spread out, much like other status-heavy teams. First priority is Outis. We want a free Gloom res to ensure they have Udjat Vanguard going into combat. This will pretty much guarantee that Outis wins the first clash, since they'll more likely be flipping tails while she goes for the 50-50. It also gives the turn after in leeway to then start applying panic types. We want to enable as many kits for our sinners as possible. For Heathcliff and Kodya, this means slotting in their defensive skills to get their engines going. Heathcliff can also just use his S3 this turn for the free coffin as well. Past there, we're going to want to look for passive activations. 4 Gloom is enough to switch on all of the Gloom dependent ones, after which we'll want to prioritize getting Free Pride. Free Pride enables Kodya to go harder and for Ishmael to start going positive against an enemy with Tremor. Plus, an ideal starting turn has 4 Gloom and Free Pride if possible, though getting as close to that is perfectly fine. On turn 2, we'll want the rest of the resources we're missing, prioritizing up to 4 Sloth if required. If we can fish for any panic type changes, that would also be ideal. Echoes of the Manor is the highest priority, followed by Blue Sand and Ruin. Depending on which one we manage to get on target will pretty much determine how we proceed with the next turn. If we get Echoes of the Manor, we can try to cash out with Yisang's Bygone Days. For this, we'll want to get as much Gloom resin lined up as feasibly possible. The more we get, the more chance we have at free sinking counts. This means we can manipulate the board by choosing off colors for this turn if Gloom is upcoming, or just sending it if Gloom is already perfect. Regardless, just send it when appropriate. As for the Blue Sand, we'll be looking to get at least 3 clash wins per turn to profit from it. Our best clashes for this are Kodya, Outis, and Heathcliff, provided he's on horseback anyhow. Rodya is always going to want to clash anyway for that sweet count boost. We want to boost our counts beyond that, we're fishing for very specific skills per sinner. S1 and S3 from Ishmael, S2 and S3 from Kodya, S3 from Heathcliff when on foot, and S2 from Forst and Gregor. Almost everything else goes neutral or negative, but stims potency instead. Finally, as for Ruin, we benefit most from nuking it down if the target has SP, so we'll instead be looking for the payoffs and potency stims. Do the opposite of Blue Sand and just start melting the target if possible. Otherwise, we can salvage some counts of egos while nuking it down. We can pop Ishmael's Bygone Days instead. Regardless, sinking itself is just a game of count management. So how are we paying out the massive stack of sinking we got going here? Well, we have a few solid options in this team. First off is Solemn Lament Yi-Sang. His is a constant payoff from Butterfly in the form of the Departed, granting damage based on sinking and Departed stacks. This one will pretty much be online from the start until the end and gives us quite a lot of damage overall. We also have the Solemn Lament Ego from Gregor. This one is a quick burst down instead, where we can nuke most targets quite hard with it once our sinking has been built up. Do note, this one requires Gregor's sanity to be quite high in order to get the most coin reuses out of it. Anyhow, the last real payoff I do need to talk about, we should do something with that Tremor. I reckon we make use of Tremor Fracture. When the opportunity presents itself, dump Outis's Bind and watch as we get a red stagger the moment we get our payoffs going. All the bonus physical damage we get out of it will go a long way, I reckon. Aside from those, we're looking at Schutz Fracture. The reason I haven't drawn too much attention to it thus far is that the payoff is rather lacking. Without other IDs that can amplify this debuff, the rate of application is rather slow. We can only get it to pop once every other turn, realistically speaking. At that point, it's not a mini deluge. It's just 50 bonus damage from time to time that can sometimes go higher than that due to resistances, but also lower under the same boat. Of course, we could underslot for it, remove Gregor from the picture and let Outis have another turn to fight with. This lets her pull it off every turn instead for the most part, but the payoff is still rather questionable. It's not as grand as Rupture, where every coin suddenly has 99 true damage attached to it. Instead, we have 50 to 200 gloom damage on top. Not to mention that the application of this status is also capped at 15 per turn. While this is a nice bonus for the time being, I feel that it's rather lackluster and not entirely worth building around. LCA Outis is an all-rounder, rather than a payoff machine. So really, this does make sense. Everyone who's hyping this up as another sinking deluge needs to get their math checked hard. Because man, it's so far off of it that it's not even funny. Heck, Solemn Lament is going to give us much more back through Butterfly rather than Should Fracture ever will. But I have hope that we're going to get at least 1 or 2 more Udjat IDs to play around with. After all, they move in teams, in seemingly different types of units as mentioned in the story. Scouts, elites, vanguards, perhaps we'll get sharpshooters or brutes. Regardless, the last part of the status's details give me some hope. It expires when no LCA IDs are left, rather than anything else. The good odds, this is the direction they plan on going. Should be careful what I wish for though. I don't want a Heisho flood, just some cool Udjat dudes to slap into a team. Preferably with some personality too. Anyhow, there's only so much I could elaborate on with this all-rounder. While her kit is very cool and thematic, the stuff Project Moon has established in the past, at the end of the day, it's a plug-and-play sinking unit with a few cool bonuses here and there. Not archetype defining yet, but if this is what we can look forward to in the future, when more synergies come to pass, I'm cautiously optimistic for now. Regardless, thanks for watching. This may be a bit of a sinking guide rather than an Outis guide, but nonetheless, appreciate it. Reminder that the community Discord is open, and this time around I will be streaming part 2 of Kanto 9 the moment it goes live. Thanks for watching. I'll see what I end up covering next time.